Well, guys, the Scream 7 reviews are in, and it's looking rather dark. It's looking like a scary new low for the franchise. Let's get into it. I'm RJ. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button if you can. Guys, Scream 7 is sitting at a 42% on Rotten Tomatoes currently. The lowest in the series, beating out Scream 3, which had a 45%. Now, I gotta be honest, I'm super excited to see this movie. I'm still excited to see it. My expectations are a little dampened here on Movie of the Year material, though. I'm still seeing this movie regardless. I'm probably still gonna think it's okay at best. Hopefully I love it anyway. There's been movies in the past where critics hate it and then I love it, or vice versa. But a 42% is not good. Especially if you're just comparing it to the other Screams. It's just the worst in the series. And I don't get why. The trailers look great to me. And we're going to do some investigating and figure out what's going on. So as always, I will read the first page of the Reddit reviews. Of the Rotten Tomatoes reviews. Sorry, not Reddit. God, no. We have a Rotten Tomato here. And you know what? I'm used to reading names. But I'm really tired of butchering these people's names. So I'm just going to say this person says and then read out their review. I don't give a fuck. So the first review says, a Rotten Tomato, despite clocking in at under 2 hours, Scream 7 feels far too long and plays out its intensity or rhythm, let alone a rhyme or a reason to prolong the series' life after 30 years. Alright. We have a fresh tomato. They say Scream 7 veers towards both familiar and brand new territories. It might not reach the same heights as other installments, but the kills and the heartfelt show that even a 7th movie in the franchise can feel refreshing at times. That's definitely a rare opinion here. We have a fresh tomato saying Sydney's back, but the script is a bit of a mess. Despite a weak reveal, Scream 7 delivers brutal kills and a meta return fans will die for. Alright. We have a Rotten Tomato here that says the new sequels were clearly building towards a promising arc for Sam that created a nice through line between them, and there was no plan B when Spyglass fired her. No pivoting to Indiana or making up character motivations on the fly can fix that. Yeah, that sounds like a big issue there. We have another Rotten Tomato. Says Scream 7 is certainly the worst in the franchise, and while an 8th installment seems like a foregone conclusion, everything about this is sloppy and inconsistent and tired. Ouch. We have another Rotten Tomato that says losing Ortega and Barrera was a critical hit and obviously left the studio scrambling, but the method they chose to move forward by weakly echoing the past was not it. And we have another Rotten Tomato that says, unfortunately, the earlier, better Screams could handle both carnage and characterization, and the latter is sorely missing here. We have another Rotten Tomato that says, too bad everything here tastes like bad faith. And I'm just jazzed by the hour to see this franchise continue on its current state. It's kind of... Then we have Fresh Tomato. This movie is simple, straightforward, and a shit ton of fun. Yes. Scream 7 feels like a return to the first two movies. That is the most encouraging thing I've heard so far. That was from Jason Adams by The New Plaid Pants, saying that it's a return to form, it's straightforward, it's just a shit ton of fun, it's like the first two movies. That gives me hope. The only problem is the first two movies got high 70s or low 80s on Metacritic. This is half of that. And I don't know if it's just a change of taste in the audience or a change of taste in the reviewers from the late 90s. It could just be that, and the movie could still be good. I'm holding out hope. We have a Rotten Tomato here that says, it does away with the story of the last two movies, with the killings in New York mentioned often, but the Carpenter sisters not at all. Yet what also has been excised is the wit, meta irony, and visual flair that's marked every other installment. Yeah, I mean, this whole idea of we're just gonna X-nay what the first two, what Scream 5 and 6 were building towards, that's an issue. That is a fucking issue that I wasn't completely aware of. This is very similar to me, like Halloween. So, if you guys remember in the Halloween franchise, you know, the first movie and the second movie, they go together like chef's kiss, right? The third movie has nothing to do with Michael Myers, okay? But when you get to the fourth movie, it sort of kicks off a new trilogy of movies. So this is a very similar thing to Scream, in the sense that Scream's first two movies, and the third one as well, kind of all tie together, right? And then there's sort of this newer trilogy that comes out of the original movies. And then, but this newer trilogy was supposed to be 5, 6, 7, not 5 and 6 and no 7. 7 being different. 7 is the Halloween H2O version of Scream, of the Scream franchise. So Scream 8, expect that to be like the Halloween Resurrection movie, essentially. And then, you know, who knows? They maybe reboot the whole series again, kind of like Real Halloween did. But yeah, it's following a very similar path, I feel, to the Halloween franchise. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments below. By the way, I loved Halloween H2O, but I was frustrated back then that it didn't connect to the Thorn trilogy of Halloween. I was frustrated back then that I'm still frustrated to this day that Halloween is broken up in so many weird, odd ways that you need a fucking map to figure out what storyline you're in. We have a Rotten Tomato that says, every scene where someone doesn't die feels like it's slowing things down. We have another Rotten Tomato that says, the labyrinthine world of the Scream franchise continues in bloody movie that delivers the gore but gets lost in the mid-mash of nostalgia, legacy characters, and tired tropes. We have a Fresh Tomato that says, but the reason why Scream 7 works is because of the kills, the cast, and how scary it can be to imagine yourself in these situations with Ghostface. We have a Rotten Tomato that says, blurting to the point of the razor-sharp 30-year-old horror franchise, this has enough moments to make it worthy for a fun dissemination at one of Randy's house parties. But there's not much else worth screaming about a seventh go-around. And we have a Rotten Tomato that says, sure, taking a stab in a different direction can work when you're this far into the series, but it doesn't make up for the script that hardly feels all that fleshed out. We have a Fresh Tomato that says, it's a movie that is generally fun and generally entertaining, though it's also aggressively fine by Scream's notably high standards. We have a Fresh Tomato that says, it may have been 30 years for Williamson to finally get to steer his own ship, but with Scream 7, it proves well worth the wait. Fans will approve. Fans will approve. Will the Scream diehards love this? You do see this all the time when you go on Rotten Tomatoes. A lot of times, the audience score is almost always higher than the critic score. It just is. This movie could sit at a 40-something% on the critic score and then be 80% on the audience score. Legitimately. I've seen differences sometimes of 40, 50, 60% differences between the critic score and the audience score. Why is that? People that are being either forced because of their job to have to watch the movie might think less of it, versus people that are paying a ticket and know what they're getting themselves into. That is my theory. It works the opposite for games. The gaming industry seems to protect the companies and give them no lower than a 7 typically, while the actual gamers get frustrated, voice of frustration with lower user scores. So it's just really weird how that works. We have a Rotten Tomato that says, despite the occasional cheeky moment and brutal slaying, a property that once satirized horror cliches has largely succumbed to them. It's kind of true, isn't it? It almost, when the first Scream comes out, you almost think, is this satire of everything we loved from the late 70s and the 80s as far as slasher goes? And the answer was yes. It was satire, but then they kind of just built their own universe off of it too, and sort of just did the tropes themselves anyway. We have a Rotten Tomato that says, after 7 movies, Scream finally ran out of targets to skewer. And finally, one more fresh tomato that says, there is much to like in the spryly sketched characters, the witty lines, and the mother-daughter relationship. And one might say that the series ends on a high note, but please let this be the end. Sorry, buddy. I'm pretty sure there'll be more Scream, especially if it does well at the box office, regardless what the reviewers say. Anyway, guys, what do you think? When you've watched Scream 7, let me know in the comments below what you thought about it. Let me know if you're going to go see Scream 7, and if I have any further thoughts on it, I'll let y'all know, but I definitely plan on seeing this movie very, very soon. But for now, this is RJ signing out. Have a good one.